So talk about the relationship between the director and the writers on Saturday Night Live.
Wow. Saturday Night Live is an interesting place because, like I think other parts of television too, the writers are king. I mean, Lorne is a writer by trade, and I think he created a place that was a haven for writers. So the writers served as the producer of their pieces. So the director and the writer worked together pretty closely on SNL. It's you know, for me as a director, I always want to try to get the best vision I can of the best version of that script on camera. And so I always look to the writer to make sure that, you know, what my vision is matches their vision. And they're very involved from the minute the sketch is picked on you know, what the set's going to look like, what the costumes should look like, what the wigs are like, what the props are like. So they are very involved. And that show is kind of a perfect storm of everything happening all at once. There's only so much that you can be on top of as the director of the show. So it's great that the writers are like producers because they're the ones that will see a prop and go, yeah, that's not the right one, you know, while I'm directing 3 other sketches.
So talk about that, because SNL is notorious for writing as late into the week as they possibly can.
Oh, yeah. So the way the week would go is the writers and the cast stay up all Monday night and all Tuesday night writing. And by Wednesday morning, they've compiled anywhere from 35 to 45 pieces that we're going to read in a cold table read with the host and the cast there. And the show gets picked on Wednesday night. It's on the air Saturday night. So it's pretty insane, especially when you see some of the more elaborate things that we've done over the years, that they were chosen probably at 10 o'clock at night on a Wednesday night. And there's a ship built by Saturday. You know, it's crazy. So once Wednesday night hits and those sketches are picked, it's the, you know, the dance of whether we can fit it in the studio, because the studio, if anyone ever goes to SNL, they'd be shocked how small that stage is. So there's certain sets that are permanent sets, and then there's sets that are literally built in a commercial break. And you have to figure out what sketches are going to have permanent homes, which ones are going to be built, which ones are performance pieces and need to be at home base. Sometimes you have to alter a little bit of what the sketch is and what the, you know, we would have conversations about a sketch where Lorne would say, oh, I really want that to be at home base, which is the center area. And I'd say, great, but that one beat we can't do there because we can't fit a set that size there. So we might alter the sketch to make sure it can be where it needs to be. You know, if there's a sketch with a hot tub, that's got to be a set that's going to live there for the whole show, because you can't really move a hot tub all around a studio. So it's a process with the cast members and with the writers of kind of all of us figuring out what the sketch is going to look like by Saturday.
And can you think of any experiences, like any mishaps that you had that really stand out to you?
That I've had. There was one, you know, the show always runs long, and we always put in more in the show than what's going to end up on the air, even after dress rehearsal. So during the air show, we'll do things like it'll be an either-or sketch, and we'll have to decide which one. Like, I won't know until the commercial break before which sketch we're going to, or we're trying for time to fit something, so we might make cuts within the sketch. So I'm directing a sketch, and there's a script person pulling out another one of my scripts and making cuts in it and then putting it back in my book. And in the commercial break, I see what camera shots got cut and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So we had this Bill Brasky sketch, and we were running really long, but we had enough to do a little bit of it, but we didn't know how much. So we came up with this plan to tell the cast that when we put up this one cue card sign, to just go to whatever the next natural break is, and then they all used to go to Bill Brasky, and so somebody got a wrong cue, and they ended it way too early. Like in the middle of the sketch. So that was a big mishap.
So what did you do?
We ended up having to do really long goodnights because normally we just do really quick 10-second goodnights, and we had to do like a minute 20 goodnights because they ended the sketch too early. I think we also had a piece of tape that we played too. It was kind of crazy. God, I've made so many mistakes on that show. I can't even think of one directly that really ruined everything. It's a hard show to do, and it's a hard show to have quality control over because it is constantly changing. One of the first things Lorne said to me, and he says it, I'm sure, to everybody, is he said, we don't go on the air at 11:30 because we're ready. We go on the air at 11:30 because it's 11:30. And it's so true. By the time you get out of the meeting, it's after 11 o'clock. They're making huge changes in all the sketches. I get a book with yellow Post-its all over it, and I try to zip through it and then give notes to the camera guys and go on the air at 11:30, and then it continues changing during the show, too. I mean, sometimes you'd have a show that's just together and it's pretty smooth sailing, but it was very infrequent. So, it was a stress ball, a big giant stress ball for me because I'm a bit of a perfectionist and I like to have quality control over my work. And it's a little hard to when, you know, there are shots being cut in the middle and big chunks of a sketch being, I mean, there's been times where I would go through it and realize that a line was cut. That was the line that and one of the cast was crossing to the other side of the room, and I have to try to find another place for them, you know, to cross so they can get to the right spot, so it's the right camera shot by the time we get to the end of the sketch. So it's a little kooky sometimes, but the best, most exhilarating feeling when you have a great show and you don't make any mistakes and it comes off without a hitch, you feel like you have climbed Mount Everest.
Talk about working with the cast and how much time you had with them to rehearse.
Sure.
And how you interacted with them.
I loved my casts, like every single one of them. I was so lucky. I was there at such a great time, and you know they had done a lot of changes the year that I came in, and it was almost a completely new cast. I think Norm had been there, David Spade, Tim Meadows. And I think maybe Mark McKinney had been there for like half a season. But everybody else was new. And most of them had never been on television before. And it's incredible how talented they were and how they quickly figured out how to make television their medium. You know, because they were used to the Groundlings or Second City where they were playing on stages. And, you know, you see everything at once. And they quickly figured a lot out. And it was a lot of fun to kind of teach them a little bit, you know, along the way. And, you know, I think performers very quickly figure out what works and what doesn't work. And you find out from dress rehearsals, you know, to air, things that work and don't work. But we would pick the show on Wednesday night. Thursday, we would start rehearsing, but we'd start with music. I would have a meeting in the morning and go over all graphics and everything that we need for the show. And then everyone went on their merry ways, like, you know, props and all that. And then I would rehearse music, and then we'd start rehearsing sketches. And we rehearsed sketches that most of the time didn't need the set there specifically in order to make the sketch work. You know, for talk shows, things that, you know, we could put temporary chairs out, we'd have rehearsal walls, and the real walls wouldn't start coming until Thursday night because the show wasn't picked till Wednesday. And then Friday, we would have a full day of rehearsal and block, you know, every sketch as the sets were being built and being worked on, and they'd be worked on all Friday night. And then Saturday you come in and like they'd have wallpaper on them, and they'd have sconces, and you know the real furniture would be there. And so we would rehearse. Usually take about an hour per sketch, maybe, you know, if it was something a little more elaborate with dance numbers and that kind of stuff, we would maybe take an hour and a half. And a choreographer would work with whatever cast was available ahead of time before we got to the floor. But it was so much fun. I mean, working with incredibly talented and super funny people, and being able to kind of mold things and make things happen, and to watch things that are now iconic, to watch them from the ground up. So much fun. I mean, first time Will and Sherry did the cheerleaders, you knew it was magic and hilarious. The first time I saw Molly, even in the table read, do Mary Catherine Gallagher, I was like, this is the most interesting character I've seen in a really long time. I was lucky enough to be there for Cowbell. I was there for a lot of really funny, iconic, unbelievable moments, like moments where I was laughing so hard I could barely, call cameras.
Do you have a favorite of all of those?
Oh, there's so many. It's crazy. I mean, I was there for all the Jeopardies with Daryl and Will, and they were all such great performers. I can't really say what my absolute favorite sketch was. One of the hardest I've ever laughed was we did the sketch called Riding My Donkey Political Talk Show that Andrew Steele wrote, and he wrote a theme song just based on this Herb Alpert song, like a horns kind of song, and he wrote these lyrics to it that were hilarious, that Will, of course, was in. And then it was all everyone doing impressions of like real news people, like I think Tim did Bernard Shaw, I think Anna did Cokie Roberts, I think Daryl was Sam Donaldson, and they were on real donkeys. And the donkeys were doing all this stuff while they were trying to perform and do these impressions. And it was so funny. We were all laughing so hard. I literally had to just start pointing to the camera I wanted to go to, because me and Steve Semina, the TD, we were laughing so hard we couldn't even control ourselves. At one point, Tim's donkey just kept dropping his head and making Tim fall off the donkey, and then he'd have to get back on it, and then the donkey would drop his head, he'd slide off it. And then somebody else's donkey went into Daryl's crotch and started literally nibbling at his balls while he was in the middle of doing a line. And it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. It was so funny. I don't know if anyone laughed at it, but it made us laugh really hard. And it was so funny because John Goodman, we had read it. Sometimes you'll read something with one host, it doesn't get picked, and then you'll bring it for another. And John Goodman, they had read that with John Goodman, and he really wanted to do it, but we couldn't fit it in his show. So every time he would come back and host, I would have the first day of rehearsal on Thursdays, his first sketch, I would always have that theme song all ready for him and play it for him like every time. And as a matter of fact, I think he hosted this past year, and Kenny Among, the supervising producer, called me. He's like, "What's that sketch? That sketch that John loves?" Because I'm like an idiot savant. I remember every single sketch. I remember who was in it. I remember the hosts. It's crazy. I need to get all that information out of my brain for other things, because I forget really important things. But I remember riding my donkey political talk show.
So talk about working with Lorne Michaels.
Wow. Let's see. Lorne is... God, I don't even know how to describe him. It's, the first time I met him, I was so intimidated and I was so scared. And, the classic thing is that when you have a meeting with Lorne, say you have a 2:00 meeting, it could happen at 2, but it could happen at 3, it could happen at 4, it could happen at 5. He just gets busy. So the first time I went to meet with him, I think I went in like almost on time, and I had this lovely meeting with him, and he just made me feel so comfortable, and he's really one of the most charming men I've ever met, and he's so smart and he's so funny, so it's just a dream to spend time with him. And I left the meeting and I was like, I wasn't scared of him at all. He's amazing. He's so funny and he's so smart, but he's, he also is a perfectionist, and he also wants, he has a legacy, and he also wants his show to be great. So, you do end up getting scared of him a little bit. But I admire him so much in so many ways. I think he is so incredibly talented. I think he has an eye for talent that's, bar none. Just look at the people that are skewering television right now. Most of them would come out of his farm, his farm team, I like to call it. He also has a talent. There were some times where there'd be a sketch where, nobody thought was fun. Like the brain trusts that would pick the show on a Wednesday night were like, I don't think that works. And Lauren would say, no, I think we should do it. And it turns out to be a sketch that has this awesome catchphrase and ends up being a big, huge hit, So I think he has an eye for a lot of that. And he's hugely successful. I mean, it's incredible. And his taste is impeccable. And he's been wonderful to me. I mean, I'm so lucky that my path crossed with his, and he continues to employ me multiple times. I just did the Maya Rudolph show with him, and I was doing Parks and Rec when he was doing John Mulaney's show, and I just sat while he was sitting in rehearsal, and we just hung out and shot the breeze. But I've been able to work with an icon. I mean, it's what he's done to affect pop culture is in the same vein that people like the Beatles have. It's incredible. And it is literally the only show where someone will write, and Jack Nicholson walks in. And on Saturday, Jack Nicholson walks in. It's crazy. It's so ridiculous, the things that he can make happen. I'll never forget the first time Jack came on the show. And it's, crazy time. It's like 11:27 and I'm pulling Post-its out and changing the da-da-da. And all of a sudden I hear Lauren go, Beth? And I'm like, what do you need? And he's like, this is Jack. And I'm like, oh, hi. It's crazy. I mean, only Lauren could get Robert De Niro to come and host that show. It's just amazing. Just the people that have walked through there, basically because of how much they respect Lauren.
Probably more so before you joined the show, SNL was kind of known for not being the most female-friendly environment.
Yes.
Did you ever?
I had heard that.
Yeah. Did you ever have to deal with that?
It's funny because, like I said in our earlier conversation, it's amazing how little I've been affected by the fact that being director is not always a female-friendly place. I think that when I started there, I think there was a little resistance just based on the fact that there were people there, like I said, from the first show. So it was me and a bunch of 60, 70-year-old men that really weren't interested in some 30-year-old girl telling them what to do. I think I earned their respect, but I think they might have treated a 30-year-old guy the same way. I can't imagine. Phil Himes, who's the lighting designer, has been there since the first show, and he's still there. And he is, he and Eugene Lee, to me, are the two Muppet guys in the balcony that complain about everything, but are adorable and sweet. So that's Phil and Eugene, and they call me the girl. They used to call me the girl. They're like, but the girl said. I'm like, they're just hilarious. So I think there was a little bit of that, but I don't think they would have necessarily been any easier on a guy that came in and replaced the director that had been there for 18 of the 20 years that the show was on the air. So I don't think so, and I was lucky enough that, the women shined from the beginning, my first week there. Sherry was a star, Molly was a star, Anna soon became a star, Maya was a star, and Tina, forget about it, Amy. I mean, I've been and not to say that all the women before there weren't stars. I mean, they really were, but I don't know whether it was just the times. That women were kind of finding their voice a little more then. But, I mean, the women that have been on the show from the beginning are notoriously, hilariously funny. And I think they stood out a little bit more back then because there was so few women doing that. But I think, I was lucky enough that the girls that I worked with were hungry, they were funny, and they knew how to get stuff on the air.
And during your time, Tina Fey became the head writer, the first female head writer. So talk about working with her in that capacity.
Tina is the biggest rock star on the planet. She is as lovely and wonderful and smart and funny as you would ever imagine. She is one of the hardest working people I've ever met in my entire life. It's insane how voraciously she works. She, when she became the head writer, what I think Tina has that I don't think it's something that can be taught, and I don't think it's something that many people have. I think she had a very unique skill. She could help a sketch in the voice which the sketch was written, even if it was a type of humor that wasn't necessarily in her wheelhouse, or even something that she really likes as far as humor. Yet she could make sure that sketch stayed in that voice, and she could make it better. And my very first memories of Tina, and it continues to this day, is, most writers, when they get sketches on, 12 or 13 episodes out of 20 episodes, that they're having a good year. Tina would get 3 on an episode, like 3 on a week. And that girl walked around with her scripts in her back pocket, and she was always making them better, and she was always pitching jokes to anybody that wanted them, and she was always, second guessing and thinking this line could be better, and what if we said this here, and just a really hard worker and such a perfectionist, and always knew something could be funnier and something could be better. And I think she carried that on as a head writer, and she didn't care if it was her sketch. She just wanted to make sure the show was funny every week. And she, like I said, had that unique quality to be able to step outside her own comedic instincts necessarily, and be able to make something funnier but keep it in the voice of the writer who wrote it, or the cast member that came up with the character.
I mean, we could be here for weeks talking about all the different cast members, but one in particular we did want to ask about was Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah.
So talk about working with Jimmy. And
oh my God. First of all, he's the biggest love on the planet. What you see is what you get with Jimmy as well. Jimmy's energy is infectious. When Jimmy started, he was the guy that would come down and watch rehearsals even when he wasn't in the sketch. And he would hang around. We'd have cast members that we'd have to hunt down because they're still on the subway, and it's their sketch that they wrote, and they can't show up to rehearsal on time. And Jimmy would stand in for them until they got there. I mean, he was like a kid in a candy store, kind of the way you see him on The Tonight Show now, where every night he comes out and there's this grin on his face like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm hosting The Tonight Show. He was like that with the, oh my God, I can't believe I'm on SNL. I think it was a lifelong dream for him. I think he cherished almost every minute of it. Believe me, everybody has days at SNL where they're like, they don't necessarily treasure the moment. But Jimmy, for the most part, was so happy to be on that show that it was a delight to be around him. He's so talented, and he's so funny, and he's so versatile. And then when he started doing Update with Tina, which I personally think is the best combination there ever was, Tina could have a bite because Jimmy could be silly, and Jimmy could be silly because Tina had a bite, and they just played off so well with each other. And, Jimmy isn't necessarily the best actor in the world, but he was funny. He was smart. He came up with really funny, great characters. And he was just a joy to be around, really.
One of the most iconic episodes of Saturday Night Live ever is the one that followed the 9/11 attacks. And first of all, just, personally, where were you when 9/11 happened?
I was home. I was supposed to go into the city that morning, but, morning at SNL times is like noon because we're up all night. And I got a call from my sister. We turned on the TV and saw that the first plane had hit, so we stayed home and watched most of that. And I didn't go into the city that day. And it was an awful, helpless feeling because you knew there were so many people suffering. And I lived in a big commuter town in New Jersey. And, there were lots of people that were lost in that town and many other towns. And it was just devastating. It was, truly, I'm sure, my parents are older and, they lived through World War II and they were born during the Depression and it really is, that moment that I will always have in my lifetime. That will be the moment that defines my generation, really. And I just remember feeling really helpless a lot and feeling like there was nothing I could do. And, you could send money or try to bring water places, but you really kind of felt like there was nothing you could do. And then I got a call about they were doing a telethon right after 9/11, and I got to direct the East Coast version of that, the portion of America Tribute to Heroes. And that made me feel so good that I could donate when things like that happen, you really feel how frivolous your skills are. It's like, what can I do to help anybody? And the fact that I was able to donate my time to be able to direct that telethon that raised a lot of money, not that it really did, it raised a lot of money, but it's not like I was, helping save lives, but at least I could use what I can do to help. And that was the first time I felt like I was doing something. And then going into SNL, we were just so nervous. It was so hard to fathom being able to do the show anymore. It was not a happy time. It was, when we were doing the 9/11 tribute, we had like a bomb scare and had to leave the Sony building. And, you really felt unsafe for the first time ever in the United States. You really felt scared. And I thought twice before I got into a subway, and it was just a very strange time. And when it came up to do SNL, we came up to the offices, and, I've said this many times, Reese Witherspoon is a friggin' rock star because she got on a plane and she came and hosted the show. She didn't bail on us. And lesser people would have.
Was she the first person? Because there's always been the story that Ben Stiller was supposed to host that episode.
I think he bailed before 9/11.
He bailed before 9/11. Yeah. Okay. Because there's the rumor that he bailed because of 9/11, so it's always been unclear whether.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't remember, but I just remember the fact that she showed up and got on a plane and came here, came to New York and did the show. Was unbelievable. And then, that cold opening is when you realize that Lorne's the master.
Talk about that. So was that Lorne's idea?
Absolutely. Hands down. The line was Lorne's idea. And Lorne definitely had a vision on what he could do to pay tribute to everyone, to let everyone know that we're in it with them and that we're trying to, I think, what he accomplished was that, we told everybody, we're in this with you. We feel your pain and we feel the same way. And we want to try to just give you a few minutes to not think about it. And I think that's what it achieved. And I think having Paul sing the boxer, and, I had a moment where it's right before dress rehearsal. We're way behind schedule. And we have to get all these firemen and all these policemen up on stage and get, the police commissioner, the fire commissioner, Lorne, and Giuliani, all on stage, and rehearse this thing with Paul Simon, and the audience is waiting to load in, and it's insane. And I'm having this moment just trying to make sure I can get everybody's face in the shot, and then I just had this moment where I couldn't breathe because you're looking at all these guys, and they've all lost friends and family, and it was just devastating. And I all of a sudden I couldn't breathe. I'm like, I'll be right back. And I just went into the bathroom, sobbed for 4 minutes, took a deep breath, washed my face, and went back out and did it. Because I was sitting in a bed in New Jersey, and these guys are, pulling people out of rubble. It's just awful. But I loved how we opened the show. I thought it was really meaningful and really powerful, and I think it was the reason why we were allowed to do the show that season and that people felt okay about laughing.
So then how do you transition from that intense opening to the humor of SNL?
Lauren's line, it was so great. He said, to Giuliani, he said, "Mr. Giuliani, can we do the show?" And he said, "Yes, you can." And Lauren said, "But can we be funny?" And Giuliani said, "Why start now?" And it was Lauren's line. It was his idea, and it literally just said, "Okay, all right, we can go on and do the show."
And just briefly, because you mentioned that the America Tribute to the Heroes, why do you think that music resonates so much with people during a time like that, and why is a special like that so important?
It's funny because I always play a game with friends, sometimes especially my friends that are in the business, where I go, if you could, you have a genie, a magic bottle, would you write the greatest screenplay ever? Would you write the best pop song ever? Or would you write the greatest novel ever? And I pick pop song every time because I feel like in 3.5 minutes, that you can emote emotion, tell a story, and make people feel. And the thing about music, even more than television and films and books, is music immediately takes you to a memory. It immediately takes you somewhere. Music immediately makes you feel safe. Immediately, brings you back to high school. Immediately makes you think of your wedding. Immediately makes you think of your parents. My dad died when I was 18, and there's this song called Leader of the Band, this Dan Fogelberg song. And every time I hear that stupid song, it makes me cry. Every time. So I think music is unbelievably healing. I think it's unbelievably powerful. I think it speaks to all walks of life, all generations, and I think it's the great common denominator. So I think music is a perfect thing when something like that happens, to bring everybody together and to heal people and to send a message.
One of the other big moments on Saturday Night Live while you were there was the 25th anniversary special, which you directed. So what is it like to have all of those past and present cast members together?
Ridiculous. It's ridiculous. That was one of those moments. That show was one of those times where I could have pinched myself 500 times and just been like, I can't believe I'm here and I'm allowed to do this. This is what I do for a living. This is crazy. And one of the craziest moments I had during that was we did this cold opening with Danny and Lorraine and Garrett and Billy. And Jane Curtin came by to visit them at the studio. She wasn't on the special, but she came to visit them in the studio. And Billy stopped rehearsal and said, we need to get champagne. We all haven't been in the same room together in a really long time. So we got champagne, and I was sitting there toasting with most of the original members of Saturday Night Live. And that made me just go, I'm the luckiest person on the planet. It's just crazy. I mean, the amount of talent that's come out of that show historically is crazy. And I've been lucky enough to work with a bunch of them after. Phil Hartman hosted the show twice. Mike Myers hosted the show a couple times. Dana did. So I've been able to work, Dan did, with a bunch of those guys, even though they weren't in my tenure. And how lucky am I? That's crazy.
I mean, you've also worked with some of the classic guest hosts like Steve Martin and Alec Baldwin and
Chris
Justin
Walken,
Timberlake.
Justin Timberlake, John Goodman, Alec Baldwin. It's hilarious.
So what makes a good host?
One of the things I tell a host when they're first doing the show, when they're super scared, like right before air, and they're freaking out, and I just say, have fun. because if you're having fun, the audience is going to go along for the ride. And that's truly one of the biggest things. I think the other thing is, it's never good when a host comes in and thinks they're going to reinvent the wheel on the show, and you have to kind of let the show take you away. Any host that is multifaceted is so much fun for the writers to write for because they can do so many different things. So that's why Justin is a perfect host on that show, because he can sing, he can dance, he can act, he can be funny, he can be serious, he can kind of be a leading man. So you can write a ton of things for them. And just having a point of view. And, also it helps when they have a good sense of humor because they make the right choices. There's lots of times where there's a funny sketch, but the host has not made a very good choice in the character they're playing or how they're playing it, or they don't get the joke, so they don't want to do the sketch. And that basically ends up killing the sketch because they don't know how to play it. So I think someone that has a good sense of humor, someone who wants to come along for the ride, and someone who has a little bit of versatility. There are serious actors that have come on the show that are great on it. Like one of my favorite actresses that did the show is Joan Allen. She's such a serious, like Steppenwolf, serious actress. And she was such a good actress. She did an impression of Madonna back when Madonna started having that new accent. And she did it dead on, perfect, so funny, because she's just a great actress, So, and it's also fun when somebody who's not from the world of acting comes and does the show. I can remember how much fun the writers had writing for Steve Forbes, because there was a point of view they could write. Adam McKay wrote this hilarious sketch about him being a roofer, wanting to know when he was getting his piece of the pie. It was so funny, and he was wearing like a mullet and cut off plaid shirt, and it was just such a great point of view. John McCain was great on the show because the writers had a great point of view for him. So that's always fun too, when somebody who's a little, not in the wheelhouse of actor.
Can you have a good episode even if the host falls flat, or does it just ruin the episode?
Sometimes you can have a good episode when it's not well written, but the host is great. Because there are weeks that it just doesn't come all together. And there's some sketches that work just because the host is awesome in it. Sometimes the cast can kind of, revive it, even though the host is not too helpful along the way. But I think they weed those people out and they don't really come back very much.
Again, there are so many musical moments to talk about that we won't get into too many of them, but we would be remiss in not asking about Ashley Simpson's appearance in 2004.
Yeah.
What happened?
I will tell you. First of all, she's a lovely girl. Second of all, she was on Saturday before dress rehearsal during our cruise meal break. The music guests sound checks their 2 songs. So in sound check, she did something where she felt like she popped something in her throat. And then in dress rehearsal, she sang the first song, and in the middle of the first song, it like popped again, and she kind of like lost. So the second song, she lip synced because she literally couldn't sing it. And the meeting between dress and air, someone came up to me and said, so this is the deal. We can give her a cortisone shot in her throat and see if that works, or we can have her lip sync. And I was like, it's not like she's Christina Aguilera that, you're going to put a cortisone shot in her throat and she's going to be singing, she's a pop singer, So I was like, does she want a shot in her throat? Because I would not want to do that. So they decided that she would just lip sync for air, and they'd try to, take the dress vocal from the first performance and try to make it for the reruns. And the drummer had never, because she had been singing live, the drummer had never triggered both tracks. So the first song, he triggered it, it was fine. And he had never done where he triggered for the second song, and he triggered the first song again by accident.
So saying, when her reps later said that the band played the wrong song, that wasn't totally untrue.
The band, what they did was, and I hope I'm not getting in big trouble for saying all this, but what they did was, I mean, I heard it. I heard the first two notes come off the Pro Tools, and the band did too, and they played like the first two notes of the second song and then started playing the first song again because they heard the trigger from the Pro Tools. And I heard it right away. I was like, it's the wrong song. So it was that the Pro Tools were triggered incorrectly, and then the band went along with it because it would have sounded terrible if they started playing the second song over the Pro Tools of the first song.
So now you're the director, and as the person technically in charge of what's happening on the show, are there repercussions for you when something like that happens?
Well, it would have been if it was my crew that was doing it, but it was literally the band that was triggering it because we weren't going to use the Pro Tools. So if the Pro Tools were my audio engineer, then yeah, there might have been a little bit. But I was trying to get out of it as quickly as I could. And Lauren was thinking that maybe they could salvage it. And when she left the stage, I'm like, she left the stage. And he's like, is she coming back? I'm like, no. He's like, okay, we can go to break now. Because I was trying to go to break like right away to try to salvage it and maybe come back and do the song. But it was crazy.
And then the decision to address it in the closing comments, that must have been a conversation backstage.
Yes, that I was probably not part of because I was in the control room, but yeah.
Wow. So what are some of your favorite musical moments from the show?
Oh, there's so many. It was pretty fun when Bono left the stage and ran around the whole studio without telling us. It was kind of crazy, but it was really fun. I have a lot of personal moments. I loved when AC/DC came on the show and we did pyro and everything. It was so much fun just to do something a little different. I loved when Radiohead was on. They did a really cool, it was, I think, the OK Computer record, and it was really intricate, and they recreated that music incredible live on stage. We had Jane's Addiction on, and they were really great. Trying to think. We've had so many good musical performances. Bjork was really cool with the orchestra. We had, Puffy with Jimmy Page when the Godzilla soundtrack came out with an orchestra. That was a really cool musical performance. Trying to think.
When there's an orchestra like that, do you rehearse? You said there's like one rehearsal with the band during the week. So is it a full rehearsal with the orchestra and everything?
Usually, yeah. I'm trying to think what else. We've had a lot. There have been so many bands that have come through that way. I love, all the artists that I like. I always love those performances. Oh, when Springsteen did, he did "You're Missing," just a piano at home base. It was unbelievable. It was really beautiful.
So why did you ultimately leave SNL?
Because I'm not going to live as long as I should because of that show. No. I left for a multitude of reasons. I adopted a baby, and he was born the night Will Ferrell came back to host for the first time. I went up to Lauren between dress and hair, and I was like, I'm such a good multitasker. I had a baby and did dress. But, I was up all day with him, up all night with work, and it was really stressful. And that show can be a grind. It's hard you kind of don't have control of your work that much because so many changes happen so last minute. And it's part of the thrill and the fun of the show, but it's also very stressful. I mean, I didn't have a gray hair on my head before I started that show. And I just felt like it was time. It was time to kind of try something new. And I really wanted to get more into narratives and half hours and kind of spread my wings a little bit. I mean, I'd done 11 seasons, so it was tough. It was hard. It was a really hard decision because I do love the show, and I love the people there, and I love the format of it. It was time.
I know this is hard to think of, but do you have a favorite memory from working on the show?
I have a lot of them. One of them is the first time Kevin Spacey hosted, who was amazing, by the way. He could do every impression in the world. He was so funny. Michael Palin and John Cleese came on, and they did the parrot sketch from Monty Python. And literally I went out to go rehearse it, and the whole cast was sitting around in chairs like they were students watching a class. And it was the two of them trying to figure it out because they hadn't done it in so long. And that was one of the greatest hours of my life, just watching that. Obviously, like the 2 times Robert De Niro hosted, just being able to work with such an incredible actor and such a nice man. I'm trying to think who else there's so many shows that are just, anytime Alec hosted, anytime John Goodman hosted, Steve Martin was such a treat. When Jerry Seinfeld hosted, I had the best time of my life. He's so great and talented. When Bill Murray hosted, because he's like one of my heroes comedically, and the first day he was a little strange to me. He thought it was a little weird that I was like 30-something years old and directing the show. He's used to like an angry older man, so... but I fell in love with him. I just loved him so much. I'm trying to think who else. Oh, it was awesome when Al Gore hosted because he was great, first of all, and it was really fun because his daughter, Kristen, went to school with a bunch of the Harvard writers from SNL, so she was there that week, and Tipper was there, and I had worked at MTV during the PMRC days where I tended not to love Tipper Gore, and I love her. She's the nicest lady, and she's really awesome. So that was really fun. I'm trying to think who else. There's just so many people that have walked through those halls that there's no way in a million years I ever would have worked with those people otherwise, But I'm able to, and, I see them time and again, and they always remember their experience at SNL. And, I've had the pleasure of working with Matt Damon, who's besides being one of the most talented actors in the whole entire world, the nicest man on the planet. And, I've gotten to know him, and I've worked with him at 30 Rock as well. And, I would have never had that experience had it not been for SNL.
So what do you think the show's legacy is?
I think the show's legacy is that it's the longest running, most successful brand of comedy that there ever has been, and has launched the careers of some of the greatest comic minds that we have. Yeah, I think that's what it is. And I think Lauren created it, created that legacy.
So let's talk about some other projects that you worked on. You directed 8 times the MTV Music Video Awards.
Yes, I did.
And, I mean, there's so many iconic moments from that, but start first by talking about kind of the process of directing that show and rehearsing with the presenters
Sure.
and the hosts and that kind of thing.
Well, when I worked at MTV, I always wanted to do the Video Music Awards, and, they never would let a staff director do it. So, of course, once I left, they came knocking. But I was really lucky. That show, to go to or to be a part of, is the best award show ever. I mean, now the Grammys are a lot more fun, but they used to not have all those musical performances. I mean, the MTV Video Music Awards would have 10 to 12 musical performances in it. The most outrageous stuff would happen during it. Everyone came to play, and there would always be some great surprise, whether it was Pee Wee Herman coming out or Michael Jackson and Lisa Marie Presley. So that show really metamorphosed, and for a while, and when I was directing it, it was like a huge deal. It was the award show people wanted to go to. So that process would be, I guess the show would usually happen the beginning of September or the end of August. So around May, we would start, April, May, start with set design and, staffing for the show, as far as, talk about once the set design was in, talk about cameras and, lighting and all that. And then the whole process during the summer is as acts got booked, at that time, everybody wanted to bring their A game. So a lot of artists would come up with different elaborate things to do on that show. So it would be a lot of conference calls with their management and with the artist and making sure we're getting what their vision was. And at that time, a lot of the artists were not just having choreographers. They would have like vision stylists that would that were basically choreographers with big mouths. But they would come up with the vision of the performance. So you'd have to do a lot of work with the individual band. So it was, every single performance was a huge production. So it was time consuming, and it was also, once you got there on site, it was like the clock was just ticking. You had to do all this elaborate stuff, and in between you have to actually block an award show. So it was kind of crazy.
And talk about casting some of the hosts, because it was mostly stand-up comedians or comedians,
yes.
Like Jamie Foxx and Dennis Miller, but then you'd have every once in a while a non-comedian like Sean Combs.
Yeah, I think a host is there for two reasons. Well, three reasons. One is ratings. Two is to just move the show along. And three is you want to get some humor and some other things in the show. And, I think the first few times I did it, Dennis Miller hosted, then Chris Rock hosted quite a few times. And Puffy did host that one year, but he was huge that year. I think it was, he had TV shows and he had, a record out and some vodka and something else. And I think he was kind of a clear choice because there wasn't really a front runner as far as comedian. I think for an award show, it's always helpful when you have someone who's a comic actor or a comedian, just because you need those moments in a show just to keep things moving along. And it would really be a choice based on the MTV brass and executives all the way down through the producers, and suggestions from myself or the producers to them. But that's a long process on who they're going to make a choice, to host the show.
You also worked in some really iconic venues, most notably Radio City Music Hall and the Metropolitan Opera House. So what's it like to do a show like that in that kind of venue?
So, it was so cool. The first year, I think it was 99 that we did the Metropolitan Opera House. That was and it was, I think Radio City was being refurbished, and they wanted to make sure they kept the VMAs in New York, because they had been in LA. We had done them at like the amphitheater. And Radio City's such a beautiful venue, and so iconic and so acoustically beautiful too, that, you can't help but get bang for your buck at that place. It's just so iconic and so beautiful. But the Met was such an interesting juxtaposition, because it was a smaller house, very ornate and beautiful on camera, but it was kind of like the inmates running the asylum for a night, which was really kind of cool, I thought, for the Met, because it was such a dichotomy of these rock and roll people jumping all over the place in this beautiful opera house that usually has this very disciplined, seasoned, opera singers at it. And we were kind of tearing the place apart a little bit. I really loved that show. I thought that was a great show, that 99 performance.
So let's talk about some of the kind of iconic moments that have happened. Your first year was the year that they kind of referred to it as the first award show in space. And Dennis Miller talked to the Mir space station.
Yes.
Talk about that experience.
Well, I think that we were having problem with that satellite feed, so it was a little stressful. But it was a really cool show. And you know, anytime that you can do something different, and that back in the day, that's what MTV did. I mean, they did things, you know, it's so funny, the first Super Bowl that we did, the halftime show that we did, you know, we ran people on the field and had fans on the field. Now they never do a halftime show without it. So there were things that we did on award shows. We did these front pits with just fans. Now every award show does it. So it was at the time kind of groundbreaking, but you know, it made the shows better. It made them better for television, you know, and more lively, and felt like they had better energy. So that Mir space station was just one of those other things that we did that kind of did something a little different, and also kind of, you know, showed something to the youth that they wouldn't necessarily care about otherwise.
You also kind of were groundbreaking in your pairing of presenters. Yeah. So you had like Martha Stewart and Busta Rhymes.
Busta Rhymes, which was, but it's comedy heaven, right? I think that's all that stuff was really important at the time. I mean, the Video Music Awards were really great about doing things like musical performances. It's like to have Bruce Springsteen to come up and sing with Jacob Dylan and the Wallflowers is cool, and to have Dave Grohl play drums for Tom Petty, and you know, to have, at the time, Guns N' Roses was the biggest band in the world, and to have somebody like Tom Petty, like an elder statesman, come out and sing with him, you know, those kind of things were moments. I think they were very big pop culture hit moments, and I think that's what MTV was really good about. And they were very good about giving you something that you couldn't see somewhere else. And they were hipper and cooler than the Grammys at the time. You know, they would have artists on. I'll never forget the first time Alicia Keys performed live, and she did Fallin' on the VMAs and got a standing ovation from the whole record industry. You know, and nobody knew her. It was amazing, and she wouldn't have been on the Grammys that year.
How do you react when you're in the booth and something like the Diana Ross, Lil' Kim moment happens?
Well, first you go wide, go wide, go wide. And you try to anticipate that kind of stuff. I always try to anticipate things like that. You know, when Flea and Anthony are on stage and I see that they might do something with their pants, I'm on close-ups because I know that something might happen that the MTV executives might not be happy to broadcast on television. So you try to anticipate stuff like that. You couldn't anticipate Lil' Kim coming out with no clothes on and Diana Ross making note of it. So there's only so much you can do. But you try. You try to anticipate when you can.
So I'm sure you didn't anticipate Michael Jackson accepting the Artist of the Millennium Award.
Oh, my word.
So what was that?
That was the most ridiculous thing in the world. So we get this call that Michael Jackson wants to come to the Video Music Awards. We're like, great, that's awesome. Well, he'd like to receive an award. Well, he doesn't have anything out, and there's already the Michael Jackson Video Vanguard that he insisted the last time that he came on the show to be named after him. So what does he want? He goes, well, we were thinking of giving him the Artist of the Millennium Award. We're like, no, we're not giving him that award. And then they call back and they go, okay, well, you know, it's his birthday that weekend. He'd like a cake. And we're like, okay. So they start describing the cake they want, and they're like, and then he'd like something shiny on top, like, you know, a big musical note, really shiny.
Are we out? Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, we'll pick